So welcome. My name is Cindy Lopez, and I'm the Director of Community Connections here at CHC. How many of you have been here to CHC for a session? Good, about half the group. Great. Well, we're glad to see you return, and we're glad to see those of you here for the first time. I'm just going to quickly tell you a little bit about CHC and then plug EdRev. And many of you, anyone know what EdRev is? Ooh, good. A few people. So Children's Health Counselor, CHC, has been here in the community for about 65 years. We are all about helping kids, teens, and young adults, achieve all these wonderful things that we want for them, resilience and feeling better, just having a brighter future, having hope. So as we think about that, our mission is to remove barriers to learning so that we can help children and teens and young adults reach all those things and be successful in school and life at home. We do that through looking at the whole child, so just not the academic piece or just not the social emotional piece, but all of those pieces together. We have 4 areas of excellence, so ADHD, learning differences such as dyslexia, anxiety and depression, and autism. So we do that through 4 different divisions here. So we have a clinical services division made up of all kinds of child development specialists like psychiatrists and psychologists, speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, behavior specialists, all those kinds of folks in our clinical services. We also have 2 schools, Sandhill School and Esther B. Clark School, or EBC. Sandhill School is a private, tuition-based, independent school for kids with language-based learning differences and attention issues like the dyslexia and ADHD. Esther B. Clark is a different model. It's what we call a non-public school. So school districts contract with them to send kids there from their district because they don't have the appropriate services in their district. So, and the students at Esther B. Clark School generally have more emotional and behavioral challenges. So it's the programs between the 2 schools are very different. And then we have community connections, which is part of what you're experiencing tonight. So that's community education and engagement. So we have sessions like this, mostly free. We offer here in person. We go sometimes off-site to schools or PTAs or, I don't know, the Palo Alto Junior Museum we're going to in a few weeks, Google. So we do all that kind of parent education and teacher education. And then we also have other kinds of programs like parent support groups. We have a teen wellness committee. And then we do a lot online. So we have an online resource library. So there's lots of resources there. If you haven't checked that out, how many people know about our online resource library? A few, okay. So you can check that out. You can just go to our website and you'll see the resource library. Lots of resources there around all of our areas of excellence. And this session tonight is being recorded as a screencast, so that means slides and the audio, and you'll be able to access it after the fact. So within a week to 10 days, usually, it gets posted to our resource library. So I also just want to plug EdRev. So EdRev is really fun. It's an annual event at Oracle Park in San Francisco. This year, it's on Saturday, May 4th. It's an event focused on kids, parents, educators, other professionals who work with and support kids with learning differences, learning and attention issues. So like dyslexia, ADHD, all kinds of things. There are all kinds of parent ed sessions going that day, over 50-ish sessions. We have free consultations with our specialists, our clinicians. There'll be some free, even legal consultations this year. There's activities on the field. Kids can go run the bases. There's a climbing wall there, yoga mats out there. There's face painting. There's all kinds of things. So it's a great day at the park, and it's all free, 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And the day before, on Friday, brand new this year, we're just trying it out. This is something you have on your chair, and that is we're doing 3 different sessions. You sign up for one of them on Friday. One is on executive functioning, one is on behavior management in the classroom, and one's on assistive technology. It's a 4-hour session. Each is a 4-hour session, so 2 hours in the morning where you learn some stuff, get some content and knowledge, take a break, we give you lunch, and then you come back in the afternoon for a couple hours and you get some practical application things that you can take back and use in your classrooms. So this is fee-based, different than Saturday, which is free, but we'd love to see you there. I know it's a Friday, so you have to figure out how to, get a sub or whatever in your classroom, but it's a great opportunity, great sessions. Chris Harris is the director of Esther B. Clark School. He's doing the executive functioning session. He lives and breathes executive functioning. And Jody Miller also at Esther B. Clark on behavior management. She's pro at that. And then Shelley Haven has her own, anybody know about Shelley? Yeah. So she runs our tech pavilion at EdRev, but she's also has her own consulting business tech potential. So really great. If you're interested and have any more questions, I'd be happy to answer questions, but you can find all of this information online. And I'm going to stop talking now. We're really happy. I'll put it here. That Jude Wolf is here tonight. Dr. Jude Wolf, I always give her a bad time. So I've known Jude for a long time, colleagues and friends, and we're really glad that she was willing and available to come here tonight and share her thoughts and expertise around executive functioning. She did this, was it just a few weeks ago? For elementary. So tonight it's all about middle school and high school. So thank you, Jude.
Hi. Can I just get I need to feel who's in the room, because I know I had prepared this presentation for teachers. I know I may have some parents, but are we predominantly teachers in the room? Oh, yay. Okay, because I brought kisses and candies, because teachers need kisses nowadays, I mean, we work so hard that I place some in the front row. So if you sat in the front row, then you got kisses, but I've got ones with almond, dark chocolate, and they've got caramel nowadays too. So we'll pass it around later on during group work, because we will have group we'll break out in groups, as you'll see that there are case studies that I created. There was some feedback that I was spending way too much on definitions for executive functioning, but let's just go right into strategies. And so I actually revamped this presentation to really go into what does it feel like to really apply these executive functioning strategies in your school sites, right? And this is middle school and high school, yeah? Because last time I did K through 5. And so a little thing about me, I could say I literally have taught kindergarten all the way up to even doctoral school, because I actually taught some adjunct classes at University of San Francisco, Notre Dame de Namur. I taught one-step class over at Stanford and University of San Francisco and Loyola Marymount, the TFA crowd as well. And then, now I'm a director at Kehillah Jewish High School. So that's a high school. I was also the director of Gateway Middle School. It's a public charter school in San Francisco. So I was the founding director there for when we opened up 6, 7, and 8. And prior to that, Cindy and I go way back to Charles Armstrong School. So, and so I taught in the Catholic schools as well. So I have taught in parochial, public, charter, independent, and independent LD schools. And so the trick around using executive functioning strategies, it's not about the strategy itself, but how you artistically incorporate that within your environment and the tools that are available for you, keeping in mind center and foremost center is the child, right? Every child will be different. And so I can give you these strategies, but it is really the way you implement it and the way you gather the information about the student. So having said that too, I don't get any, dividends or extra money from Lynn Meltzer's work, but I love Lynn Meltzer's work too. She's out of Harvard. She runs research ILD. So I've gone to her executive functioning conferences as well. There are many researchers in the field of executive functioning. Richard Guar and Peg Dawson's work. I found that the Peg and Dawson work is very applicable for K through 5, but the executive functioning program that Lynn Meltzer puts together as well, I think really works well for middle school to high school. Because again, the needs change, the curriculum changes, and so we need to flex as we continue to model these executive functionings for the adolescents. So a lot of the materials will be taken out of, are taken up primarily from this book because this is more of a practical book. So the case studies are out of this book. Very, very, very good to have. And then all of the theoretical research back, evidence-based, especially in the public school. If you're teaching in the public school, you want to use some research evidence-based for progress monitoring for your RTI pieces. How many of you are in the public school? Great. Okay, awesome. I've also developed a learning seminar scope and sequence piece, and so I didn't include that in here, but it's really more if you're teaching study skills, if you have a period, like a resource period, because I manage resource specialists too. If you are teaching a study skill, metacognitive skill based type classes, I'm happy to share that with you. So my email is on the packet, so just feel free to, we need to share. We need to share all our resources. Someone's been, passed, I'm just passing it forward. And use your creativity. Use the standards that you guys need to use for your classes, and align it well with your gen ed teachers so that you're marching in the same direction. And the kids then become aligned, right, when they're creating the strategies. So really the goal today is let's take a look at how we develop an executive functioning curriculum, not just in your particular classroom, but also how you can be a resource for your general education teachers to say, hey, Ms. Jones, you can actually use this planning guide for your elaborate project, and here's how you could do that. And then you can team with your teachers to train these strategies, and then that becomes more of a skill, right? Kids are not born with these skills. We cultivate them. So we'll do that by looking at 4 different case studies, and we'll go into that. And then we'll look at practical strategies. Okay? Okay, so we're running a little late because Cindy took a little bit of my time, but, but I want to talk just briefly about a common language for executive functioning, what that framework looks like. And then you will select a case study. It'd be great if we have groups of 5 or groups of 6, and you can select a student that you want to work with. And then you get to analyze, you get to dissect. There's a graphic organizer in that packet, and we'll talk about how. So there are 4 students. So it's this one that says building executive functioning skills. There are 4 of them here. You'll analyze it. I'll give you about a half an hour, and then after that, we'll go and debrief and then question and answer. All right, so first we have Chris, right? So be thinking about if you're teaching, I included a 5th grader in there because sometimes it's 5th, 6th, he's got a pretty good case study that we can dive into. We've got a 7th grader, a 10th grader, and a 12th grader. So as I go through the presentation, be thinking about who you want to work with and analyze and create interventions for. So when we're all talking the same language, we save a lot of time. It's easy if we're all talking the same conventions, the same nomenclature, right? And so when we talk about executive functioning as an approach for middle school and high school, it breaks it down to about 5 basic components. But what is executive functioning first, right? And then how do you select, like what are the selected executive processes that it really impact academic performance? And when I looked at the strategies for the functional academic skills, reading, writing, and math, it's what teachers have already been trained to do. It is an executive, reading comprehension strategies is an executive functioning strategy, right? Writing, there's using those graphic organizers, those are executive functioning strategies, and we'll go deeper into that. But essentially, when your executive functioning processes are intact, you can see the big picture and the small pictures. Like you can zoom in and then you can zoom out. So it looks like this. You can see, right, the mountaintops. You can see the range. You can see the gestalt, right? Then you can also see the details, the branches. You can see different perspectives, sideways, down, up, down, left, right. And you can shift seamlessly. So these skills can be trained. But first we need to consider the adolescent. So middle schoolers, 5th grade on to high school, their brains are still forming. Research by Richie Davidson in the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the Center for Healthy Minds really talks about sensitive periods of the brain. The first sensitive period is in the early kindergarten years, and then the second sensitive period is this adolescent period. And so we just are trying to hold on to dear life and say, oh God, let's just get through this adolescent year, right? As if we are so powerless to their hormones, but we're actually, I'm gonna ask you to consider taking a look at the adolescent stage in a different light. So Dan Siegel, who's my guru this time, Dan, how many of you have heard of Dan Siegel? Amazing, right? Love Dan. He's got his website called Mindsight Institute, or Dr. Dan Siegel. But he wrote this book called Brainstorm. It's for to address the adolescent stages 15, 13 on to 24. And essentially, he names it the essence of adolescence, right? Our teenagers want that emotional spark, right? They want that excitement. They want to just get a high off of life and drive really fast, or, they just want those endorphin kicks, right? They also want social engagement. They don't want to be with us. By the way, I have 4 kids, and so, my youngest just turned 21, and, they're all launched, so 21 through 25, right? And I went through that, and I was one of the ones that said, oh, God, help me. But I could sense that they wanted that social engagement. They didn't want to be around me. But I was the theater mom. I was the football mom. I followed them around because I wanted to be their executive functioning support. They wanted that novelty. They want new things. And so when you're teaching high school, or when I'm teaching middle school, it's always great for them to come up with those ideas, right? We facilitate those discussions to make them think that it's their idea. And then they have that creative exploration. And so when we approach adolescence in this realm, then we actually kind of feed the good wolf, right? And we always see adolescence as the bad wolf. In terms of, oh my gosh, there's just so much uncertainty with them. But when we see it in such a positive light, we can be that good model for decision making and the process that we want them to take when they do slow down and take that time. Essentially, adolescence is a period of transition, and we all know that. We're all going through transition all the time. And for them, it's scary. So they need some adult to really be stable and present for them. And so the first strategy that I'm going to ask you to do, and actually before I go into that, this is what they see life as, right? Everything's going way too fast, it's blurry, and they need to really slow down. And they actually want to slow down. They do. But there's so much pressure on them to continue to move fast, fast, fast. And the social engagement then says, okay, if I don't go fast, then I'll have FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. I'll miss out. So we need to slow things down for them. I had a teacher come up to me. He was teaching AP computer science. I had a 10th grader come in and a 9th grader, and he's taking AP computer science, right? So he's taken a lot of, and he just got diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia. And so here we are, third quarter, AP teacher comes up to me and says, well, Jude, I didn't know Joey had, I thought the first semester he would have gotten a 6, and 5 is the top score in an AP class, that he would have gotten a 6. But actually he's not. He falls asleep in my class, and when in first semester he would fall asleep, he'd take the test, and he would ace it. But this time he's falling asleep, waking up, and he can't do it. And I said, okay, well, that's great. What did you learn? It's like, what did you teach him? He says, well, confessions of a teacher. I didn't really teach him anything. And I didn't, you don't chastise teachers for saying that, right? I'm like, oh, great, let's talk about this and let's see what. And then what can we do? And he says, well, if when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I said, but the problem here is that there are too many teachers and distractions out there, and those distractions will be their teachers. And if we're not teaching them how to slow down, how to direct their attention, then they will forever be distracted. So as we go through this executive functioning curriculum, I would reflect upon it. Like, how much do I reflect of the values and of the behavior that I want to show to my students? And because they're learning from us. Without us talking, they're watching us. They're watching us. And so if we don't show them the behaviors and the strategies and talk out loud so they can hear us talking about it, they will never learn to embody that. And that's what you want, the embodiment of executive functioning strategies. So this is how we do it as the grown-ups around them. It's a science of attunement. Dan Siegel wrote about it. It's presence, attunement, resonance, and trust. So presence. I ask that when I talk to my students, I always put my computer screen down. I look at them in the eye. I always note what color eyes they have. So I know that the student knows that I'm present. Have I always been this way? No. I've been trained to do that, right? And so when I'm here, and I also say to them what I just heard them say, then they know that I've been present, that I've been listening. And that when they come up to me and say, Dr. Wolf, teacher so-and-so didn't give me my extended time. I said, so tell me, I heard you didn't get it extended. Can you tell me what happened? So rather than saying, well, go back and self-advocate, just advocate for yourself. Well, I don't know how to advocate for myself. That's why I'm coming to you, right? So we need to give them that dialogue. And you can't just say, well, go and self-advocate. Give them the script, right? Let's practice the script together. What are you going to say to Miss So-and-so? And I can only say that if I've really listened, right? So A is attunement. So the science of attunement is really about listening in their voice. Are they serious? Or, sometimes teenagers, they want to get out of work, And so, but then there's a reason they want to get out of work, right? Because it's too hard. Sometimes, they get a project and they don't know how to unpack it, right? And so we trust the intent. We ask questions. So tell me more about this, but you can only ask that if you're really paying attention to the tone of their voice, right? And if you've been teaching long enough, you can see where that's coming from. So R, resonance. So when you're resonating with a student, you're feeling their emotion. Most likely, when they're in my office, they either, it's 3 things: fight, flight, freeze. Because they're angry at the teacher, or they're not doing, or they don't want to do their work, or they've just shut down, and I've looked at their assignment sheets, and they've got 0 turned in homework, right? And so in a high school level, they're at that point when they're feeling really demoralized. So I really restrain myself to say, okay, so well, why, right? Like we don't, try to reframe your scripts from not why, but tell me what happened. Tell me what happened and tell me where you're at now. Let's just take an inventory of what's going on here instead of the whys, because then it becomes very defensive, right? After we do all of that, there's that trust. The trust that you will be there for the student. You will learn how to advocate with their general, for them. I actually had to talk to one of the English teachers today, and one of the assignments was go ahead and read this passage, annotate it, and then write 2 paragraphs or a paragraph in one sitting. It was like an hour. But this kid had, has dyslexia and a writing disorder, and so senior. And so he came up to me, he says, well, I got a 0 out of this because I didn't have time, I didn't know. And so I said, okay, well, let's just, it was under the category of classwork, so it was really just 10%. But it wasn't even the value of the assignment, but it was really, well, what was it for? What was the intention? So I had to go in and have a conversation with the teacher and say, hey, and it was the dean of the department. And I actually had to really watch my presence, my attunement at my residence, so that I am working collaboratively with the general ed teacher. Because most of the time they're not the ones, they only have one, if they're certified, they only have one class for, for students who are gifted, right, or who learn differently. And so I'm the resource for them. And it was a great conversation. And I said, well, I'm wondering what this assignment was about. I'm wondering if extra time could be done. So it's that framing of the question that invites inquiry. Does that make sense? All right. So after that, then that's when the academics come in, because in middle school and high school, it becomes less concrete and more abstract. And this is where the universal design for learning comes in. How many of you have heard about universal design for learning? Great, great. It's a great platform, placemat for creating curriculum. And it's essentially removing barriers, right? Removing barriers to access so you can increase engagement with a student, multiple ways to access, build, and internalize. And then you've got the representation where you can have it in audiobooks or e-text or post it on a PDF and use PDF annotation tools like Kami, K-A-M-I. Have you guys ever heard of Kami? Oh, amazing tool, K-A-M-I. It's a great tool for digital annotations and marking up PDFs. So teachers, it's free, but then there's the bells and whistles one, because the bells and whistles one, it can actually read it out loud to you. That's an app? It's an app, and it's also a website add-on to the Google Suites, K-A-M-I. So it'll really help reduce paper, right? Lost paper for our executive functioning kiddos. We just need to teach them how to, find it in the folder. But you've got that, and then you've got the action expression, and down below is the executive functioning, where goal setting, planning, strategy development, managing information and resources, and monitoring progress. Right, so those are the areas that we will focus on today. So in high school and middle school, we got to give them the task. We got to figure out what the tasks are and give them the tools for success. So today, the executive functioning processes we'll really focus on is planning, organizing, prioritizing, shifting, accessing working memory, and checking. So these are all on your handouts. But in terms of prioritizing, it's really ordering the information in relative importance, right? Organizing it in a some sort of systematic way. And then you give them what that systematic way looks like, right? You don't let them make a guess. Unless you want to, but then make it low stakes, right? Because there's something to be said for working through a problem too. You can't just always make it easy for them, right? You want them to think through a problem, but don't penalize them when they can't think through it. That makes sense? They're not going to want it. You want to reward them for taking the risk. So then using working memory and then shifting, looking at nuanced looks, because some of our students are very rigid, right? This is the one and only way, and I'm not going to be able to do this, solve this if I don't do it this way. Well, there are more ways to solve a problem. And then I think the most important part is self-monitoring and self-checking. How do you know you got it right? I just did it, so I must be done, right? I mean, my math teachers always post the problems and the solutions. And do you know those kids don't check the solutions? I mean, it's like, okay, well, it's already given to you, but it's okay. Let's just pull it out and work through it. So it's not like they're really trying to get out of work, but they just don't know the process. And so once we model it, then it becomes that much easier for them. So it is essential, as strategy instruction is essential, especially for students with learning and attention difficulties. And strategy instruction isn't just about, here's the strategy, you try it, right? You have it, you give it to them, and there's a monitoring period for the strategy to take on, right? You don't just let them go. You scaffold it, you sit with them, you work with them, and you do a check-in with them to see if they are actually using the strategy. And then you'll see in the strategy handout, you want to encourage other teachers to use the strategy too. So then it becomes part of their toolkit, right? It becomes automatized. All right, so let's take a look at handout 1, the one that says strategies to address. So can I just have someone read number 1?
Teach students to strategize to help be aware about how they think and learn.
Yeah, right? Why is that important, you think? Why would that be important? To teach them how to be aware and how they think and learn. What's our world like today? Like, how easy can they access information? Right? And so they're not, I mean, you type in search for, whatever, fish, and then they'll just come up with millions of entries. How do they know that that's the right one? So you need to give them questions. So number 2, can I have someone read number 2 for me? Just read out loud.
Make strategy use count by giving students credits on the basis of their use of strategies as well as their final answers.
Right. So thank you. Kids won't use something. You got to give them a carrot, right? You don't want to, there's intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, and sometimes you got to just kind of put the bait, just like I gave you. I put candy in the front seat for those of you guys you get rewarded for sitting in the front seat. So you got to partner with your teachers who can use these strategies and give the kids the credit, give them some reason to use these strategies. Reflection sheets are great too, and so we'll go over that. But I wanted to bring this up to your attention because when we look at the case studies, this will come in handy for the 4 students, okay? If you turn to the next page, the Meltzer book breaks it down according to the academic skills. So it's reading performance, written language, studying, and test taking. Kids who are doing well in homework or daily classwork, they show up, but then they don't know how to study for tests. And so at Kehillah, we actually have this week where we're prepping 9th graders for finals, and it's cumulative finals. And so we're giving them strategies to start studying for these for cumulative finals and not just waiting until the end of right before the test. Yes, ma'am.
So when I'm looking at this table, one of the things that caught my eye is that in several places, it's typed in use monthly calendars to plan things down. What I often find with the high school students is, well, I took out a photograph. Well, I took a photograph. It's in my phone. It's in my phone. And when I try to explain why visually it's important to have a calendar, they kind of just blank out.
Yeah, so use that picture of the mountain and then the tree. You took a picture of the tree, right? But then you're going to have a bunch of trees, but then you're not going to see the big picture. So when someone, your best friend, comes in and say, "Hey, I want to go to this party or this concert," and you don't know that you've got this test coming up, in context, you got to have the bigger picture. So I would I always use Google calendars, because Google, God bless Google. I mean, it's free, right? And so you can, it's nice, it's free, it's accessible, and you color code. I love color coding. So you could really just color code, okay, and the next slide around organization, the strategies for that is obligation, aspiration, and negotiation, right? What's an obligation? You committed to the soccer team, you committed to whatever team. That's an obligation, that's a non-negotiable. An aspiration is like, I really want to go to the concert, but you can go if, right? Then the other example for negotiating is a poem for mom. In my mind, that's a non-negotiable, but we can negotiate that. Like, how much time are you going to allocate for these things? So budget versus actual time. We always teach ourselves how to budget our monthly paychecks, right? And we have a budget versus actual. So now we need to teach them how to budget their time versus budget what it looks like actually. And I always say, if you look at your financial statements, right, or a company's financial statements, if you look at that financial statement has to represent the values, right? What's important to you? So if you spent time doing your game, and your gaming, your technology, or whatever, that's what's important to you. That's what you're going to get good at. Now you're already good at that because you spent 80% of your time on that. Now let's get you better at other areas, right? Instead of saying, "Oh, well, that's all you're doing. You're not doing your work." You're positively reframing their time and not putting them down because they already feel bad. Does that make sense? Okay. So here are some EF writing strategies. Now, my dissertation was in writing, and it's the mother lode of all work because, especially if you're writing an argumentative paper, you have to read information that you don't really take on all the time, especially if it's in history or science or what have you. It's not a daily thing. And then you have to have them make a claim, an argument, right? Then they got to organize all of that. Then they got to prioritize what's important, what's not important after their research. Do you see how much load that takes up on their working memory, on their motivation, on their attention? So they shift and self-check. This is a strategy reflection sheet. Just if you've taught them a strategy, have them reflect at the end, what strategy did you use to study for this test? I was talking to a student, and he says, "Well, look at my grades, Dr. Wolf. I'm doing really well here and here, but look at my test." I'm like, "Look at me in the eye and honestly say that you actually studied for the chemistry test." And he starts laughing. He turns red. I'm like, "Okay, I rest my case," because you didn't really use the strategy. So don't blame your teacher, and that's okay. But let's get to work. This is the obligation, aspiration, negotiation. Block off the times, insert the obligation, find times for aspirations, right? Budget it, and then put it in the Google Calendar. They need sleep. They need sleep. They're not going to perform if they don't have that sleep. So we need to and they need, Dan's, in the Brainstorm book, has this thing called Healthy Mind Platter, and it's comprised of 7 important key pieces to have a healthy brain, and sleep is one of them. Connecting time, social time, downtime. So it's in the brainstorm book. I just didn't put it in here. Memory strategies for math. Teach strategies because, so I should also say when you teach strategies, don't go to strategies first. You want to make sure that you're teaching conceptual understanding, right? Because when you teach strategies, they just use it as a shortcut. And when that strategy doesn't work and they try on a new problem, that's, they didn't really get the concept. So we're not, so I say this with a disclaimer. Make sure they understand the concept and then have them create their own mnemonic. So for example, like FOIL, this is exactly what I did when I was doing factoring polynomials and such too. So things like these, it may not be FOIL for you. It could be something else. But it uses the concepts of preserving the working memory. Right? There's not a lot of working memory out there, so you want to use these mnemonics to save working memory for more complex stuff. This is actually a really good strategy, especially for math, because just because they've done it, right, they can't go back and do the problem the same way they did it the first time. Why? Because we can't catch our mistakes. I actually caught a bunch of typos on the case study, so pardon for that. But this is, when they solve a problem, you want to have them use this kind of a strategy so they pick their mistakes up. This is a part of a metacognitive strategy for them. Reading comprehension, right? Really, reading comprehension is much more complex. When they come from 3rd grade to 4th grade, right? 4th grade is no longer learning to read, right? It's reading to learn. And so that's when comprehension really takes on. And then unfortunately, the information gets more abstract. So there's a lot more abstractions that you as teachers need to use as scaffolding to help them understand, to flex. And then the written language piece, we've already talked about that, but graphic organizers are a great thing because it really preserves the working memory. Working memory, by the way, is that in the science of the literature, it's the 7 elemental units of memory that is very temporary unless when practiced, doesn't get into long-term memory. So 7 units become larger if you actually group them into like forms. So if you think apple, orange, banana, grape, what are they? Fruits. So that becomes 1 elemental unit. Does that make sense? So if you group these ideas, and so then it doesn't it doesn't use up all that working memory. So schema maps, concept maps, those are great, great preservers of memory. And then math problems. Okay, case study time. I'm done talking. Please think about who you would like. So there is Chris, right? Does everybody have a case study? Yeah? So there's Chris, who's a 5th grader. And what I'd like for you to do is to take a look at his case study and start to write down what those weaknesses are, right? This is now the active learning, right? You were passively sitting there, you're thinking about what I just said, but now it's time to pull out those strategies, sheets, taking a look at them and say, okay, so what is Chris's issue, right? And then put it in, is it priority, prioritizing, organizing, working memory and such, right? How does that translate into math, writing, comprehension, or something else that I've forgotten? And then work with your group to come up with strategies. And then we'll come together. I'll give you about 5:20 now. We end at 6, right? So we'll have about 20, 30 minutes, depending on how the group is at, right? So maybe 5 groups, groups of 5? Yes? Yes. Okay, I think you guys need more candy. All right, come on. Come on now, let's go. Okay, so maybe we have one group here. So maybe we can put Chris on this side. Chris. Then we can divide the middle room and have Lucy here. However you guys want to divide up. I don't know. You guys are adults. Or do we need to do executive functioning strategies here? And then David on this side. And then we have Jenny. So I know what. Who wants to do David? Okay, let's have David go there. Let's have David go there. Who wants to do Jenny? Okay, Jenny's over there. The group for Jenny's there. Who wants to do Chris? Oh, Chris. Yay, Chris is over here. And Lucy. Okay, so let's have Lucy over here. And then I'll walk around. Okay, you guys get stickers when you guys are done. Okay. So this whole process, I love it because you guys are all experts. I mean, you guys have had all of these great strategies that work for you, and so when you're sharing all of those strategies, you're really, empowering each other. So this is better than me just standing here and talking about it because you guys have already been doing this. So it just reinforces what you guys already know. So for the last 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I'm going to pass around the mic. So if someone can be a spokesperson for each student, and you can talk about the student real quick, talk about, just briefly the executive functioning issues and what strategies you guys come up with, okay? So, Jody, you guys want to do it?
We're talking about David?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And I'm giving the profile of him in a nutshell
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a senior who has no diagnosed learning difference, but he's just sort of found himself struggling with organization, planning, time management, and there are a lot of questions to ask this young man. We sort of talked about things like, are the issues that you're facing sort of across the content areas? Are the papers that you're turning in late, is it a time management issue? Why are you feeling like you're stuck with initiating the task? Are you feeling demoralized and like you're not doing well, so you're less likely to start and procrastinate instead? Or were you not understanding the literature? Is it a question of language? There could be a question asked about his study strategies for tests. It says he's rereading the textbook and looking over his notes. I told my group I would be rich if I made money off of every time a student told me that they study by rereading their notes, which is, of course, the most passive, inactive way of trying to help themselves retain the material and actually learn it. So I would ask about the time that they're, sort of talk to them about the time that they're spending in this way of studying rather than in some more active study strategies. What am I missing, group? What did we talk about?
So of the 5 executive functioning weaknesses, which ones do you think David has issues with?
Certainly planning, organization. We mentioned shifting as a possibility if it were a cause for initiating task initiation, but and self-monitoring we mentioned would also be quite helpful for him in terms of time
Great.
management. And,
Yeah. And so what's one or two major things you guys talked about to help with organization and prioritizing and planning?
Definitely calendaring.
Calendar.
Yeah.
Long-term calendar and, I know. Right. Who else took David? Oh, okay. Do you guys want to add to what they got? Thank you. A+. Do you guys want to add on to? You guys agree that he was also organizing and prioritizing?
Yeah, we agreed with that, and we spent a good amount of time talking about study strategies and note-taking strategies. Because in the scenario, David was especially struggling with like cramming for tests, like doing a lot of studying the night before and still failing the test, and also like spacing out during class and having disorganized notes. So we talked about, anyone want to help me out here?
Yeah, like the active studying was mentioned. So like forming a study group or possibly like taking the subheadings or titles of the sections from the textbook and like reforming them into questions that are then answered, or like if approved by the teacher, like preparing a note card, just like something other than like cycling through the text, which he's probably like not reading on his 5th pass at midnight or whatever. And then like just what's his daily schedule when he gets home from school,
Yeah.
and like seeing if we can work with him to have a more like effective flow on that
I
kind of thing.
like the study group because it says right here that David is outgoing. He's an outgoing senior. So you're going to use his strengths to really build a community. So then, and he'll be seen as a leader too. So that's what you want to build in terms of the strengths, and then use that to build upon the weaknesses. And he loves being a leader. So that's great. Awesome. Thank you. Question? Yeah. Yeah, please, here.
One thing that I've noticed can be really helpful for students is just like a basic folder system for organizing. Like left side of the folder is like homework and like urgent, like test on Friday. This is stuff I need to be reviewing. And then on the right side of the folder is past handouts, because it said he struggled with organization and planning. And so just the very simple one folder per class can be a lot less tedious for a student
Yes.
than like huge binder clipping in individual handouts. So
And how often would you meet with David to make sure that that organization is
Just check.
working?
I ideally like weekly.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah, depending on his schedule, but yeah, weekly before you let him loose. Right? And then you can just say, oh, let's just do a quick check-in, and then give him kisses or something, or something like that. I don't like to give him food and sugar, but, but they're young and, they can metabolize those things. All right, so since I'm with you guys, who did you guys work on?
Jenny.
Jenny. Can we have a spokesperson for Jenny? What is Jenny's? Thank you. Nose goes, right?
Okay, yeah.
Nose goes.
So Jenny's a 13-year-old who's diagnosed ADHD and has visual spatial difficulties, but she's above average verbal and very social. So because of her ADHD and her visual spatial difficulties, she's having problems not only with math, especially multi-step problems, but she's also having a hard time with remembering information in science, geography, and history, so abstract facts are not sticking. And she has a hard time with multi-step projects and research papers because of her lack of organization. So her main issues then are planning and prioritizing and organizing and using working memory. And she would
Yes.
also need support with self-monitoring and self-check-in eventually, but I would start her off with a one-binder system, so she's not losing her work. And probably one of those accordion files, because let's face it, the kids will not hole punch their stuff and put it in the binder. They stuff it in the pockets. She'd need daily check-in planner.
Perfect. Perfect.
She'd need to learn how to backwards plan all of her larger
Yep.
projects. We'd need to meet with mom and dad and make sure she's following up with the same kind of planning at
I
home.
love that,
Working out a
yes.
homework schedule that includes snack and breaks in between work periods set by a timer. I would offer her practice with visual note-taking
Yes.
because she's having a problem with writing, so maybe she needs to learn how to do visual note-taking. And then, of course, Quizlet is my favorite.
Quizlet, yes. I know, we've talked about it too. So Bookshare is another place that you all need to take a look at. Because it's Learning Ally is another one that you can take a look at for downloading books, reading them out loud. So share amongst yourselves too to see where your Gutenberg project is free. That's e-text too.
Right, and then for the multi-step problems in math and remembering things in science, geography, and history, I'm a science teacher. I use a lot of mnemonics. I use a lot
Yes.
of acronyms because kids usually can kind of remember those little
Yes.
shorthand ththings, and it's easy to put in your notes. I'd probably supplement her with my notes,
Yes.
but not tell her that until after she took her notes,
Yes.
because otherwise they just rely on you. Anything else?
Thank you. I love the fact that you're sharing your plan with all of the stakeholders, right? Because that collaborative efficacy piece when the student is hearing the same voice, the same message, it's exponential growth. It's exponential growth. That's why you don't call a rough draft, right? Like a sloppy copy in the next year, and then, first version the third year, right? The kids code switching, it's hard enough for them to understand they're code switching all the time. So us adults, we all need to come together to the table to make sure that the kid is not getting confused because we're confused. That makes sense? So it's really upon us to learn part with each other. Who else has something different for Jenny? Want to add? Okay, so we have, who was the other one? Chris? Did we talk about Chris? We talked about Chris. So we talked about David. Chris? Who talked about Chris? Oh, here we go. And we have about 5 minutes, so what's Chris's issues? It's okay, you'll get over it.
Chris has many issues.
Let's just take one.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, he does.
It's very similar to the 13-year-old over there, I thought.
Yeah.
If you guys were listening a lot, all the strategies that she mentioned there were ones that would be appropriate for this kid who's just disorganized, has a hard time getting started, chunking things down, he's looking at details instead of the big picture and not being able to shift back and forth. He needs help with planning and organization as a first step. The young people in our group kind of felt like that was a really good first step for a kid this age, and just trying not to overwhelm too much with a lot of changes all at
Right.
once, but having that one folder with the two sides, or the one folder that just has the important work in it, and nothing else for now, and
Great.
don't worry about that. But having the agenda binder, we have a binder reminder at our school. All the students are trained to keep that every single day and use it as a checklist, and then the contact with home is key for the younger kids, especially, I think, to have reinforcement, because it's not an easy process. You can't just say, okay, just do this every day and you'll have it, it'll be great, and they can't keep it together. So you got to keep track of them, you got to keep after them about that, and just a lot of the same things we're hearing here, like get buy-in from the child, find out what works for them first, listen to them first, work things out together.
And I think your group talked about
Self-monitoring.
how long it could possibly take,
Yeah.
right? It would be great. We wouldn't all be here if it just happened like that, right? So we got to try again and not give up, because they need us not to give up on them. So when we're tired, pass the baton to the next person, and make sure that you're still present for, someone's present for that young person. Yes?
Do you have an opinion based on your experience for like writing in a planner daily versus, say, the Google Calendar for teenagers? Like, is there no difference really when it comes to the science or memory or those types of
Whatever works for the kid.
Okay. So like as a school, we said
Yeah.
it can do the paper binder or
Right.
can do the online planner calendar.
Yeah.
There's no.
No. Nowadays, though, I would be careful about the tech addiction piece, right? I mean, in high school, we have a lot of those who are just focusing on, and they think they're, I don't catch them swiping through their desktops, but we just need to watch that. But I also then check to see, we have Schoology, so I check to see if their homework is turned in, and I drill down to the level of detail that they can't do. But yeah, whatever gets them to get the work done. Thank you. Yes, question.
What if the child is reluctant to write it down in a planner?
So that's not going to work for them. So then use the technology version, but I would still watch it, right? Or take a picture. But then that's only a snapshot in time, so you're going to need to still help the student widen the scope, right, of the picture. Yes?
I was just going to say to your point that our school district spends a lot of money on these beautiful academic planners.
Yeah.
And my husband and I really appreciate using them because our kids don't use them.
That's great.
No, seriously, neither one, and they're very different. I mean, we have twins, but they're very different.
Cindy and I worked at Charles Armstrong, we had many different kinds of planners. And so whatever works for the student. And that's, I think, the mistake of pushing certain things and you're not taking a look at the child. So look at the child first before implementing any strategies.
Don't you have to start somewhere?
Yes, start somewhere.
You don't teach the
Yes,
skill.
of
It's like
course.
saying with math, oh, well, if you
Yes.
want to do it your way, that's okay.
Absolutely.
When
No,
it
no, no, no,
really
no,
is,
right.
you know,
Exactly.
A baseline where you have to teach them, whether they want to or not, to say, okay, everybody has to write this down.
Right. I love this word they call parsimonious, right? It's the cheapest, most readily available option. So if, don't go with the expensive, sexy looking thing because you might be wasting way too much money for that, right? So just start with, use the KISS principle, right? Keep it simple. Sweetie? Sweetie? So, and then see if it doesn't work and then we think of something else. But we're all human beings, right? They change the things up on us. But where I think we're out of time because Cindy's looking at me funny.
I also have a couple of quick questions.
Okay, so my dedication is that, I've been doing this 20 some odd years now. It's to really hope, my hope is that what I'm sharing with you, I got from other people. So just pass it on because it will make this world a better place for these kids. And we need them to keep this place green and peaceful. And so when they believe in themselves, then they will radiate that peace. So thanks, you guys, for being here. But did you have a question, Cindy?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah, don't
just
forget the surveys.
Oh, yeah. So a couple things. You have a survey on your chair for tonight's session specifically. Our program is funded. That's why we're able to offer free sessions is funded. So the information, the feedback you supply on the surveys gives us data that we can report back to our funders. So that's really helpful. It is 6 o'clock. So thank you for coming. We hope we get to see you again. Remember, EdRev's great. We'd love to see you there on Saturday, May 4th, and maybe even Friday. Thank you.